Hello and welcome back to the Engerati studio on day 3 with quite a lot of hungover faces walking around, but I managed to get a good night's sleep. So thank you very much for joining us this morning. And our first guest in the studio today is Onno, who's a senior consultant at DNV KEMA. Although very shortly we're going to have to change that because you guys have just merged, and I'm sure there's a whole bunch of marketing folk working on rebranding and things like that. But Onno, firstly, welcome to the studio.
Thank you.
And I, on Engerati, have been covering the energy storage piece in increasing detail because it's such an important part of the renewables story. And in particular, there's one technology that really intrigued me, which you know a bit about, power to gas. And tell us a little bit about what's happening with the power to gas concept.
Okay, thank you for your question. Well, the idea is that power to gas is a possibility of that the natural let's say what we see is that there is quite a need for further flexibility in the electricity grid, and when electricity can be easily converted into hydrogen, and other gases, and in that way it could supply quite some flexibility to the electricity grid. And that converting electricity to hydrogen means that, well, you have hydrogen and you can do quite some interesting things with the hydrogen. You can use it for instance, mobility, cars fueled with hydrogen, fuel cells. You can use it as a chemical feedstock. You can also inject it as hydrogen in the natural gas grid, or you can have a chemical reaction with CO2 to methane and inject the methane, for instance, in the natural gas grid. Or you can simply store the hydrogen and convert it back to electricity at a later moment.
So this is the idea when my wind turbine is spinning. I don't need to use it, as in the demand isn't there in the grid at the moment.
Exactly.
You divert that power into a type of electrolysis process. I think there's various different types. There's membranes and things like that. And that then splits the O2, the water molecule into its component parts.
Yeah, in that way you get, let's say, flexibility for your electricity grid. And another benefit if you use the natural gas grid is that you can transfer capacity, transmission capacity or distribution capacity from the natural gas grid to the electricity grid. So that means that extension in the electricity grid could be postponed, or perhaps it might not even be necessary. So there are two things with power to gas that are important.
So on that concept of injecting hydrogen into the gas grid, are there any issues with, because hydrogen has slightly different properties than methane or natural gas. It's a lighter gas. It's therefore perhaps more permeable. Are there any concerns and sort of some regulatory things about what percentage of hydrogen can be within that grid?
Yeah, good question. Yes, for sure. Let's say the percentage of hydrogen that can be added to natural gas is limited. We've done quite a lot of research on that. For instance, the Naturally project, that was a 5.5-year project that has been executed with financial funds of the European Commission. And that focused on the potential showstoppers of adding hydrogen to natural gas. And it turned out, let's say, that the pipework itself, you can add, let's say, 50%, even more than 50% of hydrogen to the natural gas grid. You could, for safety, it's not compromised until 30% of adding hydrogen. But the most sensitive parts particularly concern the end users' appliances. Burners are capable to some extent to accept some hydrogen, depending on the specific natural gas specifications in which you add the hydrogen. Most sensitive parts are particularly, let's say, tanks of NGVs, so natural gas vehicles. But let's say that concerns showstoppers, but before you can add hydrogen to natural gas, there are also quite some other measures to be taken, for instance, on seals and so on. So, yes, it can be done, but further measures should be taken.
But I suppose if you start with a fairly low base, and even if you were to add, let's say, 3% of hydrogen into the natural gas network, that's still quite a lot of initial capacity.
That's correct.
You know, once I think those conversations around 30% of hydrogen within the natural gas network, we probably have to build a lot more power to gas plants before we can reach that.
Yeah. Yes, you talk about large volumes, and it means quite a lot of electricity. But of course, you should be sure that when you add, for instance, 5% of hydrogen, that gas is not delivered to end users, which are very sensitive to hydrogen. I mentioned the NGV tanks, but also, let's say, turbines. Well, we don't exactly know how much hydrogen turbines can accept. But also underground storages, there are quite some questions about that. So it's limited, and you have to be very careful and assess the network. Where will the gas be delivered? What will it before you can decide how much hydrogen is acceptable for the grid.
And what's the sort of storage potential in terms of, because I imagine you generate electricity.
Yeah.
Then you're putting energy into a process that effectively, through electrolysis, splits a molecule.
Yeah.
And you have then got hydrogen, which that volume of hydrogen will not have near enough energy as what you put in. And then the energy that hydrogen can generate is probably not anywhere near what you put in the first place. What's the sort of loss between electricity put in to potential energy out?
Well, let's say the efficiency of electrolyzers in the order of 80%. So yeah, you lose some energy in gas, but of course, let's say that's released in heat, and when you can use the heat for good purposes, of course, then your efficiency rises as well. But yes, you lose something.
But what you're saying is not significant.
Well, of course, it could be significant, but let's say 20% is not. But
the benefit of having that long-term storage capability and everything outweighs that.
And you should, of course, also compare it to alternatives. And yes, there are pluses and minuses. But let's say I think the specifications of power to gas look quite promising. Although, let's say, for sure, let's say there has to be a lot of work to be done to ensure a sound business case.
So, knowing what this industry is like, there are a bunch of pilots going on power to gas. What are some of the results? Do you have any transparency on some of the results from the pilots and what people are saying?
Well, the pilots particularly concern, let's say, localized facilities. And they do all kinds of, let's say, experiments and get experience with it. I think the main issue of power to gas is to optimize the system, to see power to gas as a part of a whole system. The technical means are available for power to gas. Of course, there could be some further improvements and on efficiency and lowering costs. But basically, the equipment is there. There are some technical questions, but the problem is to see it as a whole system. I think that power to gas can only be a success if there is a very strong collaboration between stakeholders of the different value lines, and that's particularly electricity, and natural gas, and also hydrogen. You need a collaboration of those stakeholders over the value chains. Well, to assess power to gas and to develop a sound business case on that.
Because I would imagine that the car manufacturers who've been playing around with fuel cells and things like that ought to be on the table with this one and getting reasonably excited because one of the big issues about having a hydrogen car is that you don't have hydrogen pumps all over the place, whereas if you were to conceptually talk, this could be a way of creating more hydrogen availability,
Sure.
creating a better infrastructure.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, but of course, it has also always been possible, of course, to produce hydrogen from natural gas. That's a chemical process. It's a mature technology, and it can be downscaled to any size you want.
Yeah, but that doesn't decarbonize our energy mix, though, does
That's
it?
correct. Yeah, and it's a wonderful way of decarbonizing the energy mix. Yeah, absolutely.
Because I can see that it does something that is quite unique, because one of the hardest things to do is to decarbonize heat.
Yep.
And
Yep.
if you could generate at scale,
Yep.
and I know that
Yep.
we're away from that,
Yep.
It can also help to decarbonize heat and
Sure.
reduce our reliance
Yeah,
on that.
well, and that's of course the interest of particularly of the natural gas companies. They see it as a possibility to decarbonize their natural gas, and also to show, let's say, the flexibility of the grid. It's further, and I think also for strategic reasons, because as mentioned, I think the main value of power to gas is that it delivers flexibility and transmission capacity to the electricity grid. So if power to gas becomes a success, that means that it further underpins the value of the natural gas system. The electricity, in that way, the electricity grid can only survive with the support of the natural gas grid. So that's also, I think, also for strategic reasons important for the natural gas.
That's quite interesting, and you used if power to gas becomes
If
So that says to me that there are some concerns in your mind
Yep.
that things need to be proven before you would be able to say with some certainty that actually this is what's going to happen.
Yeah. Let's say it's easy to make it on paper, to make a block. The technical means are available, are mature. Improvements can be made, but as mentioned, I think the main challenge is to reach collaboration between the different stakeholders over the value line, over the value chains of electricity, natural gas, and hydrogen. You need that collaboration to make it to a success. And I think also from the regulator, it's needed. There is still quite a need for further regulations. It's not clear which role can be accepted by the different stakeholders. There's a matter of tariffs that should be further become clear.
It seems like this industry is causing the regulator quite a big headache, because I would imagine it is a regulator that for some time has had to maybe make one change every few years and so on. But with all the innovation going on, power to gas, other energy storage systems and everything, the regulators are suddenly having to do a bit more a bit quickly.
Yeah, well, I don't hope they get headaches, but see it as a challenge, because yes, the world is changing, and this seems it looks like a very interesting possibility of that will significantly support the integration of renewable in the energy mix. So let's see how far we can come with that.
Absolutely, and so we're coming to the end of our time here in the Engerati studio. And before I sign off, I know we've been talking about power to gas, but where are some of the other energy storage? Are there any other new energy storage forms that you say, all right, okay, these are just as interesting as power to gas, or is the rest of it stuff we've already talked about, like batteries and things like that?
Well, for sure there are a lot of other interesting storage mechanisms, but I think, let's say, you should see it as to say they all have their specifications, and I think the interesting aspect of hydrogen or hydrogen storage in the is that it combines a high capacity with a high volume, and that let's say costs which are not out of range of other things. And I think that's a very interesting and unique combination. Well, so for specific situations, I think that is a very interesting benefit of.
Well, I hope to be meeting with you again in 12 months' time, maybe in between somewhere, and we can get an update on it, because I do find it fascinating, and I think we're going to be covering the whole energy storage piece in a lot more detail on Engerati.
Okay.
Thank you for taking the time to speak with us today.
May I add a few words?
Yes, sure, absolutely.
I already mentioned that that's important for setting up a project, that there is a collaboration between stakeholders over the value chains of hydrogen, natural gas and electricity. Well, for that reason, DNV KEMA took the initiative to establish two platforms, the North Sea Power to Gas platform and the Mediterranean Power to Gas platform, in which stakeholders of those value chains take part, and in that way initiate collaboration. And well, also, let's say...
When you say platform, what does that mean?
Let's say a table.
Right, okay. So you're bringing the people together.
Exactly.
And you're helping them talk to each other.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, keep us informed of that, and because as you know, on Engerati, there are many subject matter experts who blog and give us opinion articles in various shapes. So we'd be quite interested in keeping abreast of what's going on there as well. Thank you for stopping me and adding that. And this has been another Engerati interview. Thank you for watching, and we're off looking forward to another great day at European Utility Week. I think we are on track of beating our target of interviews. I think we'll end up with about 45. And you can watch all of those online on Engerati. Thank you.